World War II left much of Europe in ruins. Cities were destroyed, economies were collapsing, and millions of people had lost their homes and livelihoods. Countries were desperate to rebuild, but they also needed to ensure such a devastating war would never happen again. At the same time, the Soviet Union, a former ally during the war, was emerging as a new threat to Western democracies, spreading communist influence across Eastern Europe. The beginning of the Cold War. The end of the war marked the start of the Cold War, a period of tension between the United States and its Western allies on one side and the Soviet Union on the other. The world became divided into two major blocs: the democratic nations in the West and the communist nations led by the Soviet Union in the East. This divide created a need for stronger alliances to protect Western countries from potential Soviet aggression. The Berlin Crisis and the need for unity. In 1948, the Soviet Union blockaded Berlin, cutting off supplies to the city's Western-controlled sectors. This event, known as the Berlin Blockade, demonstrated the lengths the Soviet Union was willing to go to expand its influence. In response, the United States and its allies organized the Berlin Airlift, supplying the city with essential goods by air. This crisis convinced Western leaders of the urgent need to create a unified military alliance, the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan. In 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman announced the Truman Doctrine, which promised support for countries resisting communist influence. Around the same time, the Marshall Plan was introduced to help rebuild European economies. These initiatives showed the United States' commitment to protecting Western Europe from falling under Soviet control and laid the groundwork for closer cooperation among democratic nations. The birth of NATO. On April 4, 1949, 12 countries came together to sign the North Atlantic Treaty in Washington, D.C. These founding members were Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The treaty established the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a military alliance based on the principle of collective defense. An attack against one member would be considered an attack against all. The core of NATO. The most important part of the NATO treaty is Article 5, which guarantees that if any member country is attacked, all other members will come to its defense. This idea of collective security was designed to deter potential aggressors, especially the Soviet Union. It reassured smaller European nations that they would be protected by the military power of larger allies like the United States. Expanding membership, NATO began to grow as more countries joined the alliance. In 1952, Greece and Turkey became members, adding strategic importance to NATO's southern flank. West Germany joined in 1955, a controversial move that allowed Germany to rearm and play a key role in Europe's defense. These expansions strengthened NATO, but also heightened tensions with the Soviet Union, which formed its own military alliance, the Warsaw Pact, in response. NATO in the nuclear age. During the Cold War, NATO relied heavily on the idea of nuclear deterrence to prevent war with the Soviet Union. The United States stationed nuclear weapons in Europe, ensuring that any attack by the Soviets would be met with overwhelming force. While this strategy prevented direct conflict, it also led to an arms race that kept the world on edge for decades. Adjusting to new challenges. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but NATO's role did not disappear. Instead, the alliance adapted to new challenges, such as regional conflicts and terrorism. It launched peacekeeping missions in the Balkans during the 1990s and expanded its membership to include former communist countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, further solidifying peace in Europe. NATO in the 21st century. After the September 11th attacks in 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time in its history, declaring that an attack on the United States was an attack on all members. This led to NATO's involvement in Afghanistan, marking a shift toward addressing global security threats like terrorism. The alliance also focused on cyber defense and countering hybrid warfare, adapting to the challenges of the modern world. NATO today and beyond today, NATO remains a cornerstone of global security. It has 31 member countries, including recent additions like Finland, and continues to work closely with partner nations around the world. As it faces new challenges such as cyber attacks, climate change, and the rise of China, NATO's commitment to collective defense and international cooperation ensures its relevance in an ever-changing world.